This right here is the COVID vaccine. And exactly 1 month ago today, a Canadian man located in the province of British Columbia became the first person in his entire country to receive monetary compensation for a COVID vaccine injury. Specifically, what happened was that back in April of 2021, back in April of last year, Mr. Ross Whiteman, he took his first dose of the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine. And then shortly afterwards, he slowly began to develop partial paralysis and was eventually diagnosed as suffering from Guillain-Barré Syndrome, otherwise known as GBS. Now, in an interview that Mr. Whiteman gave to the National Post, which is a fairly large Canadian publication, he described the progression of his symptoms as starting with severe back pain 10 days after getting the shot, which then progressed into facial tingling, causing him to then go to the emergency room. And then here's how he described what happened next. Quote, "By Tuesday, I had full facial paralysis. I could blink, but I couldn't smile or show my teeth at all, and had paralysis from the waist down as well. I had quite a few ups and downs really early." Now, to give you a bit of background here, GBS is a type of autoimmune condition wherein the person's own immune system begins to attack the peripheral nervous system, mistaking one's own nerves as a potential threat. This can then lead to things like weakness, numbness, pain, or in some cases, like in the case of Mr. Whiteman, it can even lead to partial paralysis. However, the positive here is that according to the U.S. National Institute of Neurological Disorders, quote, "Most people eventually recover from even the most severe cases of GBS. After recovery, some people will continue to have some degree of weakness." So the fact that most people recover is, of course, very positive news for both Mr. Whiteman as well as his family. And according to the report from the National Post, thankfully, Mr. Whiteman is now at home recovering. However, let's circle back to the issue of the vaccine in this whole equation. Up on your screen is research which was conducted by the University College of London in the United Kingdom. And according to this research, while the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines reported no additional risk of GBS, the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is the one that Mr. Whiteman took, did present a small increase in GBS risk. Here's specifically what that paper from the UK said, quote, "Overall, following a first dose AstraZeneca vaccine, there were 5.8 excess GBS cases per million doses of vaccine, equating to an absolute total excess between January to July of 2021 of between 98 to 140 cases. First dose of Pfizer and Moderna and second dose of any vaccination showed no excess GBS risk." And so, even with the AstraZeneca's increased risk, it is still a rare condition. However, regardless of how rare the incidence rate is, it does still occur, just like with Mr. Whiteman. And because of such cases, back in June of 2021, the Canadian government set up something called the Vaccine Injury Support Program, abbreviated as the VISP. This is the program that people can apply to in order to get monetary compensation from injuries that were likely the result of a vaccine. And since it was set up, a total of 774 people have filed claims with this particular program seeking monetary compensation. However, as of today, only 654 of those claims were found to be admissible, 26 claims have been assessed by the Medical Review Board, and out of those, a total of 8 claims have thus far been approved. And just for your record, according to the government website, in order for a claim to be approved by the Medical Review Board, it means that, quote, "These claims represent cases where it has been determined by the Medical Review Board that there is a probable link between the injury and the vaccine, and that the injury is serious and permanent." However, out of those 8 claims that have been approved, not all of them receive monetary compensation. In fact, on the government website, they don't actually list the total number of people who have received financial support, and instead, there is what they write next to the asterisk, quote, "As not all claimants that are approved have had their payment processed, the total amount paid to claimants is now disclosed due to privacy reasons." However, regardless of the privacy aspect, according to the publicly available data that we just saw on our screens, we know that out of the 774 people who applied, only 8 thus far have been found eligible to receive monetary compensation, with Mr. Ross Whiteman of British Columbia being one of the first. And in terms of how much financial compensation Mr. Whiteman can stand to receive, here's what the report from the National Post said on this front. Quote, "The maximum lump sum amount a person can receive through the VISP is $284,000. Though Whiteman chose not to disclose the specific amount he was given for privacy reasons, he said he did not qualify for the maximum payout. He told CTV News, which is another Canadian publication, quote, "We're kind of somewhere in the middle of what's being offered." He also told CTV he is eligible for income replacement at $90,000 per year. Now, if you've been following the story of vaccine injury compensation, then you are likely well aware that this is a fairly rare phenomenon, not only in Canada, but across the entire world. It's at the point now where when someone does receive some sort of compensation, it actually becomes a big news story. Just like how, about 2 weeks ago, over in the UK, a woman whose partner died after also getting the AstraZeneca vaccine became the first person in that entire country to receive compensation over a COVID vaccine death. Specifically, her partner of 21 years became sick shortly after getting a shot, developed excruciating headaches, and then died about 8 days later. His death certificate confirmed that he died due to complications from the vaccine, and therefore, the UK government, through their own vaccine injury payment system, they paid the woman £120,000 in damages, which is equivalent to roughly $143,000 US. However, again, these cases are the exception, not the rule, especially here in America. Because if you think that having 8 people in a country like Canada being eligible for compensation is rather small, you should know that as of today, as of right now, here in the US, that number is actually 0. 0 people have gotten any type of compensation for any vaccine injury. And so this brings up a very interesting question, because as vaccine mandates have gone into effect across the entire country, you might be wondering, what legal remedies does a person actually have if they experience some sort of adverse reaction? Because no matter how safe the vaccines are, and no matter how rare an adverse event actually might be, when you vaccinate, let's say, 200 or 300 million people, they will invariably show up. Even the FDA, in their approval letter of the Pfizer vaccine, they do mention the possibility of side effects, including things like pericarditis and myocarditis. And so, in terms of what legal remedies you have, well, the answers to that question might actually surprise you. And I'll tell you about it right after I show you this beautiful coin. This right here is an American Walking Liberty 1-ounce gold coin. And typically, I order at least one of these from our sponsor, American Hartford Gold, every single month. The reason I do so is because, as you likely know, the inflation rate in this country is the highest that has been in, the last 40 years now. Everything like the price of food, the price of housing, the price of gas is absolutely going through the roof. And in fact, market experts like the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, he's not only predicting a recession, but he's even using words like unprecedented economic hurricane. And so listen, I absolutely do not give you any financial advice, but I would recommend that you do what I do, which is pick up the phone and call American Hartford Gold. Their super friendly staff can help you diversify your portfolio by either getting physical gold and physical silver delivered directly to your doorstep like I do, or deposited directly into your IRA and your 401k accounts. They make the entire process super simple. And actually, besides me, they have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau with quite literally thousands of satisfied clients around the country. And best of all, to our viewers, to the viewers of Facts Matter, they are currently throwing in $2,500 worth of free silver on your first qualifying order. So giving them a call is an absolute no-brainer. So pick up the phone and call 866-242-2352. That's 866-242-2352. Or text Roman to 65532. Their link will also be down in the description box below. And now let's head on back to the studio. And now, we here at the Epoch Times wanted to answer a very pressing question, one that's become a lot more pertinent in recent months as all types of vaccine mandates have gone into effect throughout the entire nation. And that question is whether or not Pfizer is still immune from lawsuits over their COVID vaccine now that it's been federally approved. And after speaking to several vaccine lawyers, the answer appears to be yes. Pfizer is still immune from being sued, meaning that if you live in an area with a vaccine mandate and after taking the vaccine you experience some kind of serious side effect, you will not be able to file a lawsuit against the vaccine manufacturer. However, the reason for that situation is actually quite interesting, and it has to do with the way that the entire system works. To start with, we spoke with Mr. Mark Sedaka, who is a lawyer focused on medical litigation, and during his career, he has handled over 175 vaccine-related cases. And he told us that the FDA's approval of the Pfizer vaccine doesn't actually change the immunity which was afforded to the vaccine manufacturer, meaning that if an individual has a severe reaction after getting the shot, they cannot file a lawsuit. Here's specifically what he told us. Quote, "The government encourages the production of vaccinations and medications used to fight a pandemic like COVID-19 by protecting the companies making them from lawsuits. In fact, the government has already labeled any future COVID-19 vaccine as a quote-unquote countermeasure." Now notice something there. He mentioned the term countermeasure. And just for your reference, according to the HRSA, which is the Health Research and Services Administration, a countermeasure is a quote, "vaccination, medication, device, or other item recommended to diagnose, prevent, or treat a declared pandemic, epidemic, or security threat." Okay, so now we're beginning to get somewhere. And so we reached out to the HRSA, and their deputy director got back to us and wrote this in an email. Quote, "COVID-19 vaccines, including Comirnaty, which is the Pfizer vaccine, are covered countermeasures under the Countermeasures Injury Compensation Program, or the CICP. And this is where things get a little weird, because under the 2005 PrEP Act, which stands for the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act, vaccine manufacturers, vaccine providers, vaccine distributors, as well as vaccine program planners, they are all immune from lawsuits related to COVID vaccine injuries as well as death, unless it can be shown that there was willful misconduct in the production of the vaccine by the particular company. And so, because of this law, the only remedy to someone who has been injured by a vaccine is what's known as the CICP, which is what was mentioned in that email. So what exactly is the CICP? Well, it is a compensation program that was set up back in the year 2010. It's currently run by the U.S. government, specifically by the HHS, which is the Department of Health and Human Services, and it was set up to compensate people who were injured by vaccines. However, the amount that a person can actually be compensated is very limited. Here's how one lawyer we interviewed described it. Quote, "The CICP is the only remedy available to those who are injured by the vaccination. The damages are limited to a death benefit for those who die, lost wages, and medical bills not paid by insurance." Furthermore, he said that people have only 1 year from the date that the vaccine was administered to file a claim. And then he added this, quote, "I call it a feel-good program. We like to say we have it because it makes people feel better. But when you dig into it, it is a joke. There is no transparency like a true judicial process. There's no provision for attorney's fees, thus making it difficult for any injured individual to even retain a lawyer. Any appeals are handled by 3 people hand-selected by HHS to review the claim." Now, from the year 2010 to August of last year, there have been a total of 2,186 claims that were filed with the CICP. And out of them, 1,693, or 77%, were for COVID-related countermeasures. However, none of the COVID claims have been approved for payment. And the lawyers who are on those cases, they say that they're not optimistic about any of these cases, about the fact that they will win, because the vaccine is still so new and the data is still being collected. And so they have not yet developed a comprehensive list of adverse reactions which would be covered by this compensation fund. Here's what the HRSA Deputy Director wrote to us in an email in this regard. Quote, "An injury table for COVID-19 medical countermeasures will be developed when there is sufficient data to meet the compelling, reliable, valid medical and scientific evidence standard. When a table is developed, it is published in the Federal Register with an opportunity for public comment and is posted on the CICP website." And so what that means is that by law, if you experience an adverse reaction to the vaccine, whether you took it voluntarily or you were mandated to do so, you cannot sue the manufacturer. And then if you go the route of the CICP compensation program, you likely won't win because they quite literally have not yet set up the table for adverse reactions that they officially recognize. And it's exactly this type of situation that led Mr. Mark Sadaka, who's one of the lawyers who we introduced earlier, to say this, quote, "With the liability protection offered to vaccine companies, there is no incentive to disclose safety risk of countermeasures outside of the simple goodwill of the large corporations that sell the product." Now here I will mention that the FDA says that the vaccines which are approved, quote, "undergo the agency's standard process for reviewing the quality, safety, and effectiveness of medical products, and that it conducts its own analysis of the information in the BLA Biologics License application to make sure the vaccine is safe and effective and meets the FDA standards for approval." However, some experts have questioned the FDA's quick approval of the Pfizer vaccine, because normally this approval process would take several years. In fact, here's how the normal approval process is described on the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia website. Quote, "Vaccines are usually made by first showing that they are safe and effective in experimental animals. Once this is established, the vaccine becomes an investigational new drug, and the company is given an investigational new drug license to further study the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine in adults and eventually children. Again, these trials can take years, giving companies ample time to provide the FDA with proof of long-term safety and effectiveness. However, in the case of the COVID vaccine, the approval process was based on only 6 months of safety data of the phase 3 trial, where many of the participants in the control group have actually been unblinded, which, by the way, does not mean that it's not necessarily safe. It just means that it was pushed through very, very fast. In fact, in their licensing process, the FDA bypassed the external advisory committee, which normally reviews and comments on the agency's decisions in the approval process. However, in this case, they said that the application did meet the agency's requirements. Here's specifically what the FDA wrote in their approval letter to biotech. Quote, "We did not refer your application to the Vaccines and Related Biologicals Products Advisory Committee because our review of information submitted in your BLA, which is the Biologic License application, including the clinical study design and trial results, did not raise concerns or controversial issues that would have benefited from an advisory committee decision." However, even though they did not go through an advisory committee, Dr. Peter Marks, who's the director of the FDA Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, he said that the public can rest assured that the agency's decision to approve the vaccine was properly justified. Here's specifically what he said, quote, we have not lost sight that the COVID-19 public health crisis continues in the U.S. and that the public is counting on the safe and effective vaccines. The public and the medical community can be confident that although we approved this vaccine expeditiously, it was fully in keeping with our existing high standards for the vaccines in the U.S. Which might very well be the case, however, because the process was sped up so quickly, as we mentioned earlier, the CICP system has yet to compile a list of adverse reactions that they officially recognize. Meaning that if you experience an adverse reaction, no matter how rare it is, well, you pretty much have no legal recourse at this moment, and likely no legal recourse for the next several years. If you'd like to go deeper into any of the research that we went through today, I'll throw a link down into the description box below this video for you to check out. And all I ask in return is that as you're making your way down there to the research, take a quick detour to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, as well as subscribe to this YouTube channel in order to get this type of honest news content delivered directly into your YouTube feed every single weekday. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free.